My name is Joyce, and I'm the founder of Global Coin Research. We're our venture DAO. And I'll have all the panelists here introduce themselves and give a little bit color about what they're building. Why don't you start, Yi?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Yi. I'm the co-founder of Scroll. So Scroll is building a general-purpose scaling solution for Ethereum based on zero-knowledge proof. We are building a bytecode-level compatible zk EVM. So for user and developer, we are just like Ethereum, but much cheaper, faster, with a higher throughput. And we believe that the future will be cryptographic. So we are building the most trustless zero-knowledge proof technology to remove trust to mess.
Hello, my name is Alex. I'm co-founder of Meta Labs, which is the company behind zkSync protocol. zkSync is a protocol on a mission to scale Ethereum public permissionless blockchains in a way that can reach mass adoption while not compromising on the core fundamental values that makes blockchains valuable to us. And the technology we're building is the zk stack. It's a zk EVM. And it's currently launched on Ethereum as zkSync Era. For the past couple of months, we've been the most actively used L2 on Ethereum from all the L2s, with over 30 million transactions per month and accounting for almost half of the daily active users. So it's a very interesting forefront of innovation in the Ethereum space.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Felten. I'm co-founder and chief scientist at Offchain Labs. We're the company that developed Arbitrum. Arbitrum provides a pragmatic scaling solution for Ethereum. There are two public Arbitrum chains, Arbitrum 1, which is the flagship chain, and Arbitrum Nova, which provides lower transaction costs through use of external data availability. And then we also support Arbitrum Orbit, which is a program that allows people to build their own chains with customization.
Hey everyone, I'm Sandeep. I'm one of the co-founders of Polygon. And Polygon is a solution, layer 2 solution on the mission of scaling Ethereum. And we have very deep conviction on the zk technology, and we are building zk-based scaling solutions for Ethereum. And we also have our flagship product, Polygon POS chain, which is now also upgrading into a zk Validium. And arguably, it is the most, one of the most adopted chains in the ecosystem, with large amount of developers across DeFi, NFTs, gaming, and enterprises they're using. We recently launched Polygon CDK and made it fully open source, and it is available for anyone and everyone to launch their fully ready zk rollups, which have permissionless proofs, fully tested, audited, and a mature zk prover for them to launch their own dedicated zk chains. And we are also building an interoperability layer with which all of these chains can interact with each other.
Thank you all for that introduction. So why don't we just quickly give folks an example here of an application building on top of your project, right? I know Scroll hasn't launched yet, but maybe an example of what you imagine it look like if we were building it on top of you.
Yeah, currently we are in the it's our last testnet, and we will launch our mainnet very soon. So what I'm expecting is that, because I just last month went on an African trip to understand different use cases of blockchain, because people still doubt whether blockchain is really useful, whether it's just a token game for rich people, or it can really serve for some real world use case. For example, in some places there is currency inflation, and people need to access to some stable coin, and also their financial infrastructure is not so stable, and you need to do global payment, and also build a better credit score system really for people. So I'm really expecting our different local communities, we have very strong community in Turkey and in some other places. I went to Africa, and I do want to see some local builders can build something for people to solve some real life, real world use cases. And as far as our current testnet, there is large Uniswap already deployed, and after mainnet, I hope all the Ethereum applications will deploy, because it's so easy to deploy, everything works, it's so seamless, and then I expect more use cases really focusing on real world, not just some game.
Yep, Alex.
On zkSync, we are, since it's a generic scaling solution, we see all the kinds of applications that people deploy on Ethereum. I can particularly say that we see a very strong activity in the areas of DeFi, gaming, and NFTs. What's interesting that's being built on zkSync that we don't see in many other places is wallets using native account abstraction, which zkSync natively supports. So things where, like wallets that support native biometric authentication, signing transactions from your phone, and paying fees in any tokens or using gasless transactions. Because we believe that the UX has to match or even exceed the convenience and the comfort of the Web2 technologies to reach the stage of mass adoption.
So Arbitrum is a general purpose scaling solution like all of these. We see a lot of DeFi applications. Arbitrum is arguably the leader in DeFi with more total value on chain than all the other L2s combined, as well as the highest trading volume of L2s. So in the DeFi space, there's a lot going on. We have a really large and robust ecosystem. The gaming is one of the real growth areas, to that end, we have been working on, or we just recently released the Stylus upgrade, which lets people write smart contracts in regular programming languages like Rust, C, or C++, compile them and run them in a fully composable way on the same chain with EVM applications. That not only helps to onboard a lot more developers and to be able to use legacy code like libraries, but also gives a 10 to 15x improvement over EVM in performance. So we think that's going to be a big boost to the gaming ecosystem.
Sandeep, please.
Yeah, I mean, at Polygon, I can go on and on about the use cases because they're just probably with many accounts, probably more than 50,000 applications, different kinds of. But as we see, we keep seeing a lot of niche Web3 use cases. We are still, in the Ethereum ecosystem, the third largest DeFi ecosystem after Ethereum and obviously Arbitrum. But an interesting part is that this DeFi ecosystem is, hasn't had any kind of incentive events for last 2 years, and it seems to have an organic, sticky effect to it. It's doing well. Then on NFT side also, of late, Polygon is now rank 2, only after Ethereum mainnet. And then on the gaming side, generally, Polygon is considered to be a pretty big leader. We in the market, roughly 90-95% of the games that you see, especially after Immutable X, which was a very big player in the gaming space, roughly controlled 30-40% of the markets. They are moving over their infrastructure completely to the Polygon build chains. So on the gaming, it's really strong. In 2022 itself, I think Delphi Digital had published a report that around $2 billion were funded into on-chain, decentralized games, and out of that, around 1.5 billion was directly invested into the, Polygon and immutable based games. And on top of that, around 600-700 million was Ethereum, which also nobody's going to build on Ethereum. The games actually, most of the games are going to be built on the layer 2. So, we assume that large number of games will also come there. And then finally, the brands and enterprises, I think, many of the people in the audience would know that, their Polygon, has been doing a lot, very good on some of the largest institutions in the world, from, Reddit to the Starbucks to the Disneys and Instagrams of the world. Everybody, was integrating now, and experimenting. And recently, I think there are some leaked, Twitter tweets from people that in Singapore, Grab has launched this proper Web3 integration. And this is not run of the mill. It looks like, because with some of the things that we have seen, these are proper almost stablecoin payment use cases. Not stablecoin, but payment use case in the form of NFTs. And NFTs are kind of notes. Users can pay using the Grab wallet. And this is huge because Grab has around 180 million users in Singapore. And basically like 35 to 50 million daily monthly active users, and around 15 million transactions a day. And even if a small percentage of those transactions start happening with these NFT kind of bills, basically you have $10, $5, $2, $3 bills, and you can pay. It could bring in a lot of on-chain adoption. And Polygon believes that with opening up this enterprise space, we open up the pie for all the amazing protocols like that we are building in the Ethereum space. And this hopefully we'll be able to grow the pie for the entire industry on the same.
Thank you for that. There's about currently 10 billion TVL across L2 scaling solutions. And I imagine that probably to accelerate very quickly given all your recent developments. How do you guys think about ETH mainnet versus the scaling solutions as a dominant liquidity hub?
So because all the layer 2s, their kind of liquidity unlocks some smart contract in layer 1. So definitely the layer 1 liquidity is way larger than because it need to add up all the layer 2s and all the DeFi protocols on Ethereum layer 1, so it's still larger. I think for layer 2, what we can talk about is that eventually how many transactions will be executed on different layer 2s. Instead of, eventually Ethereum will just become a settlement layer. Instead of sending different DeFi transactions, moving NFT around, it will only be verified some proofs. And I believe that in the future, there might be over 95% of the transactions will be settled down on some layer 2. And layer 2 will become the entry point for Ethereum, because the next billion of users definitely can't enter Ethereum through a layer 1 because it's not so scalable. And for layer 2, you want to become a really great entry point for the next billion of users. And for us, to become that entry point and become part of the ecosystem, we want to stick to what Ethereum has, all the philosophies of Ethereum, all the values of Ethereum, remain open, remain community-driven, remain incredibly neutral, and become that trustworthy layer. People think of maybe Scroll eventually as just an extension of Ethereum. It's not just technically you are scaling Ethereum, but you are part of your extension of Ethereum, which because you share the same value, and you are building only, for example, building one thing, which is the most trustworthy entry point for every user. So that's our mission, and we believe that that will, instead of for example being a technical provider which build a lot of fancy features and making our system more and more complicated, interconnected, we just build one system, super simple to use. You don't need to worry about anything, and 100 times cheaper.
So you're saying, just to clarify, you're saying that eventually L2 will become the settlement layer and also an entry point for users to come in.
So layer 2 will become the execution layer, and layer 1 will become the settlement layer for verifying the proofs. And the users enter Ethereum space through a layer 2. And then we want to build a layer 2 that stick to all the Ethereum's values, not playing any kind of aggressive marketing, not shilly, but focus on research, focus on solving the fundamental problem, focus on building a system that is really usable, that works in practice, and that is trustworthy.
Yep. Alex, thoughts?
I fully agree. It's been in the Ethereum's roadmap for a couple of years now. Vitalik has set up this vision for Ethereum to embrace the roll-up-centric approach, where Ethereum becomes a small place to settle things. Roll-ups and L2s in general are becoming the actual place where all things happen. You can think of it as in the analogy of Ethereum is an island where you can only build small houses. Right? It's fundamentally limited in space. Now, roll-ups are something like skyscrapers. So you can take Singapore as an analogy, right? They allow you to have the much more floors, much more activity happening on the same surface. But that's probably still not enough to accommodate arbitrary number of people. A city of a fixed size can only grow so far, even with super high skyscrapers. So at some point, you will need to transcend that and grow beyond what rollups are capable to do and go limitless. And this brings you to things like validiums and volitions that are more like reclaim of the land on the sea, where you can extend indefinitely further beyond this island.
Yeah. If we look at where the liquidity is today, on Ethereum, there are hundreds of billions of dollars of liquidity. Some fraction of that, a small fraction of that, has been bridged to various L2s. But on the L2s, there tends to be more activity relative to the amount of TVL. So people who are just holding value are more likely to have it on Ethereum. People who are actively using it are more likely to be on L2, which makes sense because trading activity is cheaper, lower gas fees on L2. But there's been another interesting thing that has been happening that we've seen on Arbitrum, which is that in addition to having the largest amount of bridged value from Arbitrum, from Ethereum on Arbitrum, we've seen a growth of tokens being launched directly on Arbitrum. So currently, there are more more value in Arbitrum native tokens on Arbitrum than there is in bridged ETH or tokens. So I think that's an increasing trend that we're seeing. That the cost of minting and managing a token is also cheaper on L2. And we're seeing increasingly activity happening there.
Yeah, Sandeep?
Yeah, I mean, in a very simple term, I feel that the future is like, you know, how we say that the businesses have B2B model versus B2C model.
Sure.
So for Ethereum initially or till today is like more like U2C model, user to chain model. And now we are seeing Ethereum moving into this chain to chain model. Like that means in next 2, 3 years, 4 years, you would see Ethereum to be the base settlement layer, which is providing security and the settlement guarantees and security features to these chains. But then I see the user activity on Ethereum, on the downtrend only, because users would want to interact on the layer 2, and especially now with advanced technologies like zk rollups and optimistic rollups, which have what Arbitrum is doing with permissionless fraud proofs, or with zk rollups permissionless validity proofs and all that. Users will feel more and more confident about having the value existing on these fully Ethereum secure chains, and Ethereum becomes the source of security and settlement. So it becomes like a chain-to-chain business model instead of a user-to-chain model.
That's helpful, and thank you for all your data points. I think in this current market, what we're seeing right now is that majority of the roll-up costs are going towards the Ethereum, right? For data, for settlement, as you said. So what do you think will happen to you guys, and what are you guys planning for to reduce that cost, right? We're talking about 80% to 90% of the transaction costs going to Ethereum, right? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
So for us, because every layer 2 need to settle down on Ethereum, and currently, what we can do best is that, we do our best to move the bottleneck for, our throughput, and to move that bottleneck become, Ethereum's bandwidth bottleneck, like their DA bandwidth limitation, and that's what we can do best right now. And because before dank sharding, even not before 4.4, because 4.4 can only make some of your data become cheaper. And also one controversial opinion is that, even after, I believe that people usually think, it's after 4.4 you can become 10 times cheaper or even more. But after our analysis, the reality might be because, the first launch of 4.4 might be just very few blobs. And the people, maybe different layer 2s will compete for this data blob. So even they have different, metering for this data space, it might still be expensive for a while. It might be 2 times cheaper, 3 times cheaper, but not that significant. So only if Ethereum move to dank sharding, and it's really increase, the parallel data shards, and you really increase the limitation that for roll-up throughput. So that's why, what we are focusing on is that, we do the best we can before everything comes, and then, we help Ethereum to build the future. So we are not just building for ourselves, but we aim to kind of, in the future, delegate more engineering effort to help Ethereum to build and for the whole ecosystem to grow together. I think that's very important for us.
Alex?
In order to understand how to lower the costs, you need to understand what causes the bottleneck. We have different technological components of that make the price of the transaction. It's the execution, the data storage, data availability or publication, and then the bottleneck of the sequencer, like how many transactions can you just sequence and put into the block. And if you look at what's the most expensive, what's the most scarce component today, it's clearly, by far, data availability.
Right.
Not the storage, not the execution, not the sequencing, but the data availability, which you have to pay to Ethereum to broadcast the transaction through the Ethereum network so that everyone can reconstruct the state so that we can remain a trustless, permissionless rollup. And this cost is indeed not going to improve significantly with AEP 4844, with proto-dunk sharding, and which is hopefully coming this year. But if you look at the actual data throughput, the bandwidth, what the AEP 4844 is bringing, it's roughly half of what Ethereum is already capable today. So it's not really, yes, it's exclusively reserved for rollups.
Right.
So initially it will drop the price a little bit, but then we're quickly going to saturate it, and we're going to be back up to the prices where we are today. So, even if we wait a couple of years and Ethereum implements gradual sharding, I think it's always going to be a slower increase in capacity than the increase in demand. So data availability is the central point of our efforts. What we do with zkSync are two things. I spoke about them in the previous talk. One is we're using state diffs instead of call data. Like we are publishing not the inputs of transactions, but the outputs, which is a very interesting approach which allows you to compress data. If you do like 100 or 1,000 transactions that all write in the same storage slot, for this transaction type, you only have to pay like a single data slot at the end of the block. And so you can take examples as oracles and arbitrage transactions and so on, like, which will become massively cheaper. And the second approach is just extending the data availability into Volition, into something that goes off-chain, but still seamlessly interoperates with your rollup accounts that fully inherit security from Ethereum. And this is what we're building with zk Porter.
I guess I'm a bit more optimistic about this than Alex. I think several things. First, I think it is true that currently for rollups, the cost of posting data on Ethereum is the dominant part of the cost. And our team has worked really hard to try to minimize that cost by using the best data compression and timing when we post data for when Ethereum gas prices are lower and so on. But there is a limit to how far that goes, right? I think currently on Ethereum, call data, which is what we use, is artificially expensive because the original Ethereum design was optimized for a different world. And with Ethereum's pivot to the rollup-centric roadmap, there's a new emphasis on data availability as one of the core functions of Ethereum. And you see the EIP 4844 that is coming in a few months as a first step in that direction. But I think over time, the cost of data on Ethereum will go down so it's not too much higher than the cost of general commercial data storage. And I think people will still want to be able to do things more cheaply, but I think the advantage of this sort of external data availability solutions will be less as Ethereum kind of matures into a mode where data availability is one of its major, is one of the most important parts of that protocol. So I'm optimistic long run that these costs are going to come down. In the meantime, we do offer the option of external data availability for people who are willing to make the trade-off of not having the strongest guarantee of availability, which you get from Ethereum, but people are willing to trade off making a just small additional trust assumption in order to get lower cost. I know that all of us are probably exploring those sorts of approaches as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, from our side, we try to take like a 10-year, 15-year, outlook on this. And, I agree with the fellow panelists here that, in the future, even when Ethereum brings in, proto-dank sharding, or, I mean, this sharded version of data availability, and we have a huge amount of data availability, is that still enough for the whole world to come to Web3? I am not sure about that. So that's why, like, I feel that I have a more use case specific view on that, and which also very aligns with what Ed was saying, is that for the people, for the use cases who are willing to take the trade-offs, they can still have like off-chain data availability solutions in various different ways. For example, gaming and social use cases and all that. You don't need Ethereum's data availability guarantees. Whereas for DeFi, where you would want those kind of guarantees, and then only the chains which want to have huge amount of liquidity and the DeFi applications, they will fight for or bid for those kind of data availability costs. And actually users would also be transacting on a much bigger kind of transaction value, so they would be willing to pay that kind of fees. Having said that, Polygon is known for its zk prowess. We also believe that because of the zk validity proofs, the role of data availability in terms of providing the security, of course, it's still there, but it kind of gets reduced to a very large extent, because if you have a roll-up or data validity proof, zk validity proof, then as a sequencer, you can do this kind of long range or this kind of data withholding ransom attack, which is possible for sure, but it's kind of looks very, very rare, and it will be possible in very few kind of scenarios. So that's why I believe more in the use case specific kind of security with zk proofs. You have fair enough security. All the validiums also will have fair enough security. But if you want DeFi level of security, then go for the Ethereum data availability guarantees.
Thank you for that. So it sounds like we have the group who thinks it's depending application specific and user specific, and then these two gentlemen here thinks that it's more optimistically that eventually we will just get to a good and safe stage. I love to delve into decentralization, right? This is a topic that's been kind of pressuring, I think, a lot of the layer 2 projects and from the overall crypto Twitter and the crypto industry. How are you guys thinking about this? I'm particularly interested in which one do you decentralize first, verifier, sequencer? What do you guys think? Where are you in the roadmap here? Maybe you could start.
Sure. I think for us, because we are building a zk solution, so there are multiple parties inside. Mainly, there are two parts you need to decentralize. One is sequencer. So sequencer is generating your block, and then there is prover. Prover is basically taking your block and generate proof attached to this block, saying that all the transaction in this block is valid, and then you submit this proof on chain. So for us, because all the rollups are in a stage where you are not, really delivering what a layer 2 should deliver. You haven't removed your multi-sig, you have multiple training wheels, you are in a transition stage. Even on mainnet, there are alpha mainnet, beta mainnet, there are different testing stage. And too early to decentralize everything is a very dangerous signal for me, because even if you decentralize, so before you think about decentralization, you need to think about why you want to decentralize sequencer and why you want to decentralize prover. And for example, some reason for decentralized sequencer is that you want to avoid real-time censorship resistancy, and there are some other avoid single point failure. But there might be some other approaches which people are proposing using some other crypto graphic primitives, maybe you can encrypt your transactions so that you still can't censor certain type of transactions. And there are some other way, you can send your transaction on layer 1 and enforce layer 2 to execute that transaction. So before we talk about decentralized, we need to think about what's a goal you want to achieve. And then for us, we believe that decentralized sequencer first. At least right now, we have multiple proposals for that. We already have some kind of proof of concept invitation for how we decentralize this. But it's in early stage. We want to discuss with the community about how we decentralize and what's the philosophy and what's the goal we want to achieve. And instead, we might want to decentralize prover first. So there are multiple reasons for that. One is that prover doesn't influence the block generation. So as far as you are producing some legit block, even if your circuit has some bug, the prover can only do some stateless proof generation for certain blocks. So it lowers your risk for being hacked, even if your system has some bug. And the second thing is that people are really bullish on some some direction, like making zk even become 10 times faster, which is using ASIC, using customized hardware, using even more technology to make proof generation become faster. So we want to encourage people building better and better proving technology by opening this door to the community so they can start earlier because they know like there is a huge opportunity to make proof generation faster and then to enter our ecosystem. So that's our goal. And also we have published our paper talking about how you use GPU, ASIC, and FPGA to make proof faster. This is the first academic publication. So I think that's very important to start early. And then after 1 year, you deliver those kind of ASICs, and then you can make your zk proof system become even more efficient, and also avoid some single point failure in your proof system. But also trying to avoid the fast approval of the win and hold some philosophy for that. So on our roadmap, firstly, we are building a really simple to use trustworthy system, and it works. And it works very well. And then later decentralize the prover to avoid single point failure, to incentivize the community to build better hardware, and then to make this further more performant. And then later move to more sequencer decentralization and the philosophy inside.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
I think he did a really good job going through different components or aspects of decentralization. So I'm going to do the same and offer our perspective. So we'll start with the validation. I think we can take a moment to celebrate the decentralization of validation, at least on zk rollups today, because every single transaction that happens on any zk rollup is enforced in validity and is verified by every single full node on Ethereum. So we're already more decentralized than any other scaling solution. The second component is the sequencer, like who decides what transactions go in the block. This is a massively important component. Like from the perspective of the mission and for zkSync, everything we do is measured against the North Star of the mission, which we outlined in the zk Credo Manifesto. So you need to enforce censorship resistance and credible neutrality of the transactions and dealing with MEV in a credible neutral way. And you also need to make sure that the system actually remains resilient to network outages, to you don't rely on a single entity, on a single validator for the availability. We see it with rollups. With rollups, the sequencer sometimes goes down, which is unacceptable for blockchains, right? So just for this, from this perspective alone, we have to decentralize the sequencer as soon as we possibly can. And zkSync is working very hard on with high priority on the consensus-based decentralization of the L2. The third component is the prover. And the prover is important, but I would argue that if you have decentralized sequencer and you have permissionless proof generation and then the leader election in the sequencer basically places the responsibility to generate the proof on the leader for the current block, you already halfway there. And if the leader fails, then it just goes to the next leader and so on. So if the sequencer is decentralized, your prover is kind of already half decentralized. So when we think about decentralization of the prover, it's really about decentralizing the proof generation to an extent where the prover is actually distributed across, it's not done in one single cloud or in multiple different cloud providers. It's actually widely spread across different small machines. A lot of just like mining is done potentially on the consumer hardware, on GPUs, on mining machines, on gaming machines, and so on. So we made it's really important for our goal for us to decentralize sequencer to this extent. This is why the prover, prover technology we're using is already optimized for consumer-grade hardware, and the new proof system we recently introduced called Bootjam is provable on our GPUs with under 16 gigabytes of RAM. The very last part is the decentralization of the governance. I think that's ultimately the most important thing, to reach credible neutrality when no single party can decide on the future of the protocol and the way it evolves. And this is something where we will announce plans, but this is something we think a lot about at zkSync.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ed, please.
Sure. So in designing Arbitrum and building it along the way, we've had a decentralization roadmap in mind, and we've been executing that as we go along and being careful not to introduce things during the development process that would get in the way of decentralization. Now, I think it's important, as Alex said, to recognize that decentralization is really about reliability. It's really about making sure that the system can operate the way it's supposed to operate. And it is intertwined with notions of reliability and sort of liveness and progress that you're going for. I think it's also important to recognize that we need to think realistically when we're thinking about decentralization. If we say that something can be done by any user, then we had better make sure that it's the case that an actual user with the actual laptop they own will be able to do that function. Otherwise, it's really just an on-paper sort of right to participate. So what you really care about is making sure that you have resilience and making sure that you have decentralization of power in the system. And that is both technical and economic. So as far as the progress of Arbitrum technology on that decentralization roadmap, we're getting close to the end of that roadmap to get to the decentralization goal. Making the validator role fully permissionless. For that, we have code that has been published with the security audit, and it's in the pipeline toward being deployable with the approval of the Arbitrum DAO on the main chains. And then the remaining piece is sequencer decentralization. And we just announced a couple days ago a research partnership with Espresso Systems to research and then develop a decentralized version of the Arbitrum sequencer. So we can see the end of that decentralization roadmap. We have executed most of the steps, and we're pretty close.
Yeah, from our end also, like we have been very lucky at Polygon that we have actually 3 different zk teams which are progressing in different directions. So you have Polygon zk EVM, which is like a single sequencer zk zk rollup that we have launched. And then we have Polygon 0, who is building, like, who's breaking the boundaries and building new paradigms into how you prove chains. And, we are already very far ahead in the process of, creating zk proofs where you can prove the entire decentralized chains itself, which essentially means the decentralized validator chain, you can directly, prove them. So all of these things are under very high progress from our side. So, we believe that once these kind of provability is available, you can easily, decentralize the, sequencer or validator or, these combination of these roles. But I think like again, on this one, we have a very use case specific view on this. For example, like if you are running a public DeFi chain, like, and which has, let's say, these lending borrowing markets, which needs to be having liquidations and all that, there you need to ensure that there is like credible neutrality in terms of achieving liquidating transactions. Let's say, if there is a large DeFi chain and then there is a liquidating transaction coming in a very high volatility environment, and let's say some of the insiders, like till now we have great, very responsible projects which are doing all of these things, so we don't expect that to happen. But then, and we trust these teams to not do it, but in future, if some other DeFi chains which doesn't have these trustworthy people, sequences running the chain, and there is such kind of scenario which I'm talking, like there's a liquidating transaction, and the party running the sequencer itself has a big loan which well, let's say can get liquidated, they can essentially censor the transaction. So apart from the liveliness which both Alex and Ed said, in terms of the liveliness guarantees of the chain, or the reliability of this network, decentralization is important. But for DeFi chains specifically, you need decentralization for these other purposes, like instant censorship resistance also, to have the fully functioning, and vibrant permissionless DeFi ecosystem over there. So for that kind of use case, you need, decentralization, absolutely. But then let's say again, you have an application, and that application has a social, let's say dApp built on top of it and all that. There you might want to rely, or a gaming application, you might want to rely more on like a centralized sequencer which is providing a good enough service, and you don't need to decentralize, but you want to go with a higher performance for the better UX of the users. So we have a very user experience and use case focused view on this particular thing. But as I said that, because we being very lucky in having 3 different ZK teams, one of our teams is already, pretty far ahead in that, and we'll be able to have decentralized sequences and decentralized chains very easily for the people or for the builders. And also, we will add these functionalities into our Polygon CDK. So you can actually, we give an analogy of having a Subway sandwich. Like if you are launching your chain, you can choose what you want to do. You want to centralize sequencers, decentralized sequencer, what kind of data availability you want to choose, and you can have your own chain as per according to your requirements.
This is super helpful. Thank you. Everyone's already applauding, given how great these answers are. So thank you so much. We're out of time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate everyone coming on stage and giving their perspectives. So we look forward to hearing more from each of you and your projects. Thank you.